The wind outside howled like a dying beast, but inside the stone walls of the arena, it was quiet, too quiet. Dr. Elias Ward stepped forward, his boots sticky with dried blood, his eyes scanning the massive circular chamber. Alien torches lit the space with flickering blue light, and a metal gate groaned shut behind him. He was trapped now, and he knew it. Elias had come to this war-torn planet as part of the Human Peace Accord. He wasn't a soldier, not a fighter. He was a doctor, a healer. Someone who had seen too many wars and tried to fix what others had broken. But nothing had prepared him for what he was about to see. At the center of the arena stood a tall alien judge, draped in black armor. His forearms folded across his chest, behind him. A crowd of alien spectators filled the stands, their eyes glowing, their breath steaming in the cold air. Some cheered, others laughed, but many were silent, as if waiting for something dreadful to begin. Two small figures were shoved into the center of the arena, pushed by armored guards. Two girls' sisters, alien children, trembling, their wrists bound in glowing restraints. They couldn't have been older than 8 or 9 in human years. Their skin was pale violet, eyes bright with fear. One limped slightly, her ankle was swollen and bruised. The other held her sister's hand tightly, refusing to let go. "Dr. Elias Ward," the judge called in a deep, booming voice. "You have been chosen to witness the trial of survival." Elias's heart pounded in his chest. He had read rumors, heard whispers, but this was barbaric. "These two are twins," the judge continued. "Orphans of the last rebellion. The law says only one may live. The other will be executed by order of the Supreme Code." Gasps rose from the crowd. Some cheered, some wept. The girls stood frozen, clinging to each other, eyes wide with terror. "And you, human," the judge said, pointing one long finger at Elias. "You will choose which one lives." Elias's mouth went dry. "What?" he whispered, stepping back. "This is madness. I won't do this." The judge's eyes narrowed. "If you do not choose, both will die. That is the rule." The crowd erupted, shouting, chanting, "Choose, choose, choose." The younger girl fell to her knees, crying. The older one, though trembling, tried to shield her sister with her body. Elias couldn't move. His legs felt like stone. His mind screamed, "This isn't real. This can't be happening." He looked at the guards, at the judge, at the crowd. No one seemed to care. No one saw two little girls. They saw entertainment. They saw justice twisted into a game. The judge stepped closer, voice cold and final. "You have 30 seconds. Decide." Elias's hand shook. He fell to one knee beside the girls. "Please," he whispered. "Don't be afraid." The girls stared at him, silent, confused. "Which one of you has pain?" he asked gently. The younger one raised her hand, pointing to her sister's swollen ankle. "I'll be okay," the older one said softly. Save her tears blurred Elias's vision. How could a child speak such words? How could she be the one comforting him? The countdown had begun. 10, the judge roared. 9, 8, Elias stood, his breath ragged. He looked back and forth between them. He hated himself. He hated this place. He hated the galaxy for allowing this. 5, 4, I pick. Elias choked on the words. "I pick." The younger one. The crowd went wild. Cheers, shouts, even laughter. The guards moved fast, grabbing the older girl and pulling her away. "No." The younger one screamed, reaching out. "Sella, Sella." Elias shouted, running toward them, but it was too late. The metal gate slammed shut behind the guards. The last thing Elias saw was Sella's face, staring at him, silent. No tears, just understanding. The sound of the execution bell rang across the arena, and everything went silent. Elias dropped to the bloodied ground, unable to breathe. The girl he had saved curled beside him, sobbing into his coat. And Elias whispered the words he didn't believe. "It's going to be okay," but inside, he knew the truth. Nothing would ever be okay again. Elias couldn't sleep that night, the cold ground beneath him. The torchlight flickering in the small stone room, none of it mattered. All he could see was Sella's eyes. The way she looked at him, not with anger, not with fear, but with something far worse, acceptance. He had chosen her sister, Niari, and because of that, Sella was gone. The young girl lay curled in the corner, trembling in her thin blanket. She hadn't spoken a word since they were taken out of the arena. She didn't cry anymore, but Elias knew silence like that meant something deeper. A wound not on the body but the soul. He stared at the walls, at the ceiling, at the shadows moving slowly in the corners. The sounds of other children echoing through the halls, their soft sobs. Their quiet prayers reminded him where he was. This was not a shelter. This was not safety. This was a prison, dressed up as tradition. Elias had traveled across the galaxy as a medic. He had seen disease, war, famine. He had operated on dying soldiers in muddy trenches. He had stitched together the limbs of screaming survivors. But never had he been forced to choose who lives and who dies, not like this. Not by picking one child over another. He got up slowly and walked over to Niari. Her eyes were open, but empty. "Do you want water?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Food." Another shake. "I don't want anything," she whispered finally. Her voice thin. "I want my sister." Elias's throat tightened. He sat beside her, unsure of what to say. "I'm sorry," he said after a long moment. I didn't want this." Niari looked up at him, her eyes shining in the dark. "You chose me," she said. "Why?" He froze. "Why?" Because she was younger? Because her sister had asked to save her? Because he panicked. There was no right answer. There never had been. "I didn't know what else to do," he finally said, "if I didn't pick." "Both of you would." He couldn't finish the sentence. Niari turned her head away. "I wish you picked her," she said quietly. "She's stronger than me. She's smarter. She wouldn't cry all the time." Elias felt like someone had driven a blade through his chest. How could a child think that way? How twisted was this place that even the survivors felt guilty for living? He stood and walked toward the iron door. A guard outside stared in through the bars. Elias clenched his fists. "I need answers," he said. "I want to know what happened to the girl who was taken." The guard snorted. "She was executed." "Human, you heard the bell?" "I want proof," Elias growled, stepping closer. "You people lie with a straight face. Let me see her body." The guard looked amused. "You don't get to ask questions. You were lucky to walk out of the arena alive. Now, sit down and be quiet before someone changes their mind." Elias walked back slowly, the rage boiling in his chest. He had saved one girl, yes, but at what cost? And what if? What if they were lying? What if Sella wasn't dead? He had seen the fear in the judge's eyes when he demanded to see the body. He had seen the hesitation in the guards. What if they didn't execute her? What if they took her somewhere else, somewhere worse? He sat down again beside Niari. "Tell me about your sister," he said softly. Niari blinked, surprised. She was brave. She whispered, "She always protected me. She would sing to me at night. Even when we were hungry, she would tell me stories about space, about humans." Elias felt a tear slip down his cheek. "Do you think she's still alive?" he asked. Niari didn't answer right away. Then she nodded. "She promised me we'd be together forever. She wouldn't break that." Elias looked toward the door, his mind spinning. If Sella was alive, he had to find her. If there was even the smallest chance, he had to try, not just to ease his guilt, but to keep his promise to be human, even when no one else was. "I'm going to look for her," he said, more to himself than anyone. "I don't care what they say." Nyari reached out and grabbed his sleeve. "Please," she whispered, "bring her back." Elias nodded. His eyes cold and sharp. He would find the truth. He would uncover whatever darkness these people were hiding. And if Sela was still breathing somewhere in that cursed place, he would bring her back no matter what it cost. The next morning, the door creaked open with a long, eerie groan. 2 guards stepped inside, their helmets hiding their expressions. One tossed a small tray of food on the floor, cold bread. Gray soup, nothing more. Then, without a word, they turned and left. Nyari didn't move. She just sat in the corner. Knees hugged to her chest, eyes staring at nothing. Elias picked up the tray and set it near her. "You have to eat," he said softly. "No," she whispered. "If I eat, it means I'm okay, and I'm not okay." Elias sat down beside her. His heart ached with guilt. He had saved her, yet every moment reminded him of the one he couldn't save. Nyari hadn't spoken much since the arena, but when she did, it always cut deep. "I had a dream," she said suddenly. Sela was standing in a hallway. But she couldn't see me. She was crying. But no sound came out. She kept reaching for something. Then vanished. Elias looked at her. "Do you think she's trying to tell you something?" Nyari shrugged. "Maybe she's scared. Maybe she's trapped." Those words chilled Elias more than the cold floor ever could. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something deeper than what the guards were saying. If Sela had truly been executed, why were there no remains? No proof. Just a bell, a scream, and a locked door later that day. Elias left their room under guard escort. He had demanded a meeting with the fortress medic. Hoping to ask questions, the alien medic, a gray-skinned being with 6 fingers on each hand, met him in a narrow infirmary. "You're wasting time, human," the medic said. "The girl is gone. She was marked for execution. That is the law." Elias leaned forward. Eyes sharp, "You don't cremate the bodies. You don't return them to family?" "There is no family," the medic said coldly. "And we don't waste resources on criminals' remains." "But she was a child," Elias snapped. "She hadn't done anything wrong. She was just born here, born from traitors," the medic corrected. "That makes her property of the court." Elias clenched his jaw. Then he noticed something on the table beside him, a small data chip. The medic turned away for just a second. Elias moved fast, slipping the chip into his sleeve, back in his room. Elias used his portable scanner to access the chip. The files were encrypted. But one folder stood out: trial subjects, alternative disposal. Inside were logs, numbers, cage tags, transport records. One entry burned into his brain: subject S43, redirected to facility B13. Designation: weaponization candidate. Elias stared at the screen. His heart pounded in his chest. Sela was alive. They hadn't executed her, they had taken her for something far worse. Nyari looked up as Elias returned, her eyes hopeful for the first time. "You found something," she whispered. He knelt beside her and nodded. "She's alive," he said. "They moved her to another place, somewhere underground. They're experimenting on children. Turning them into weapons." Nyari didn't cry. She stood slowly, her small hands clenched into fists. "Then we have to go get her," she said. "She saved me. Now it's my turn." Elias felt a mix of pride and fear. Nyari was brave to brave for someone her age. But they were just 2 people in a fortress filled with guards. How could they possibly get to Sela? That night, Elias met with someone he barely trusted in, old alien smuggler who owed him a favor from years ago. The smuggler, a one-eyed creature named Radek, agreed to help for a price, but Elias didn't care. He would pay anything, risk everything. He just needed one thing: a map of the underground labs. While the plan was being set in motion, Elias returned to Nyari and began training her quietly. He taught her how to move quietly, how to avoid cameras, how to breathe through fear. They used old pipes and shadows, slipping through cracks in the wall. Practicing at night, Nyari never complained. Her small body still trembled sometimes, but her eyes burned with fire. She was no longer just a survivor. She was becoming something else. A fighter, a sister who refused to let go. Then one night, the signal came. Radek had smuggled the map and left a key near the air duct behind their cell. Elias held the key tightly, staring at Nyari. "Are you sure?" he asked. "This won't be easy." Nyari nodded once. "I'd rather die trying," she whispered, "than live knowing she's alone." Elias smiled sadly. "You sound just like her." Together, they crawled into the narrow duct, the cold metal scraping their skin. As they disappeared into the darkness, Nyari whispered a promise into the silence. "I'm coming, Sela. Hold on." And deep below, in a cage without light, a sister stirred, her chains rattling softly as if she had heard it. The air duct was narrow, dark, and cold. Every crawl forward felt like pushing through the throat of a metal beast. Elias led the way, his flashlight barely a flicker. Behind him, Nyari followed silently, her small hands gripping the edges of the vent to keep from slipping. The map Radek gave them was old, burned at the corners, and smelling like rust, but it was all they had. Facility B-13 wasn't on the official blueprints. It was buried beneath the fortress, where no light reached and no hope survived. As they reached a side shaft, Elias gently kicked out a metal grate. They dropped into a storage tunnel lined with crates and old cables. Far in the distance, faint humming echoed through the pipes above. It was alive down here, but not in a good way. Nyari clung close to him, her violet skin pale in the low light. She looked like a shadow, small and fierce. Her eyes scanned every corner, looking for her sister. She didn't speak, but Elias could feel her heart pounding. Even without touching her, they crept past a locked door labeled Quarantine Zone. Then another marked Test Chamber 7. That one had a smear of dark fluid near the handle. Elias didn't want to know what it was. "This place wasn't built for medicine," Elias whispered. "It was built for control." After turning a sharp corner, they finally reached a steel door, half open. With flickering red lights above it, a sign was carved crudely into the metal. "The Forgotten." Inside were rows of small cages, barely big enough to kneel in. The smell of fear, oil, and blood filled the air. Dozens of alien children, different species. Ages, colors, all locked away like animals. Some stared at Elias with wide, hollow eyes. Others flinched and looked down, as if even hoping had become dangerous. Nyari froze when she saw them, her voice cracking. "What? What is this?" "This," Elias said bitterly, "is where they keep the ones not chosen, the ones they don't kill right away. They test on them. Change them, sometimes turn them into weapons." Nyari stepped forward, gripping one of the cage bars. A young alien girl inside whimpered, hiding her face. "We have to help them," Nyari said. Elias nodded. "We will." A sound came from the far end of the room, mechanical footsteps. Elias grabbed Nyari's arm and pulled her behind a stack of crates. A tall figure entered, an armored scientist. Face hidden by a black visor, in one hand he held a glowing tablet. In the other, a shock baton. He walked from cage to cage, pressing buttons on the tablet, scanning barcodes on each child's collar. Then he reached the farthest cage, paused, and spoke quietly. "Subject S-43. Elisa's heart jumped. That was her. Sela." The scientist tapped a code on the panel and opened the cage. Inside, a small figure stirred, limping, shoulders trembling, eyes half closed. It was Sela. But not the same Sela Elias remembered. Her body was thinner, her arms bruised and bandaged. Metal implants peeked through her skin near the neck. She moved like someone half asleep, like her mind wasn't fully awake. The scientist placed a collar around her neck and whispered something. Sella stood up slowly, blinking. Then, like a machine, she began walking behind him. Niari gasped. But Elias clamped a hand over her mouth. "Not now," he whispered. "They'll see us." They followed silently as the scientist led Sella through a side door marked Reconditioning Lab. The hallway was long, lined with flickering lights and locked doors. Elise's hands trembled. He had seen patients in this kind of state before. Over-medicated, mind half erased. Soul barely holding on, they slipped through after them, hiding in shadows at the far end of the hallway. The scientist tapped a key code and entered the lab as the door closed. Elias slid a small tracking beacon between the hinges. Then they backed away quickly, hearts racing. They couldn't rescue her now, not with armed guards nearby. But they had seen her. She was alive, back in the forgotten cell room. Elias unlocked one of the cages with a stolen guard chip. A boy stepped out slowly, eyes wide. "We're going to get you out," Elias whispered. Not tonight, but soon, one by one, Elias and Niari unlocked 3 more cages. Whispering hope into ears that hadn't heard it in years, Niari held one girl's hand and said, "My sister's in there. We're coming back for her and we'll take you too," as they climbed back through the vent. Elias looked back one last time. So many children, so many forgotten souls. He felt the weight of it all pressing against his chest. "We can't save them all," Elias said quietly. "But we can start with one, and once we get Sella," Niari replied. Eyes fierce. "We come back for the rest," and in the darkness behind them, small voices began to whisper again. For the first time in years, they whispered hope. Sella sat on the cold metal chair, unmoving. Cables ran from her collar into a black machine behind her. Pulsing with blue light, her arms were limp at her sides, her feet bare and scarred. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the machines and the rhythmic beeping of her brain monitor. She wasn't alone. The scientist stood nearby, watching her like she was a puzzle, not a person. "Subject S43, he muttered into a recorder. "Reconditioning incomplete. But reaction time improving. She responds to vocal triggers, but resists memory erasure." Sella blinked slowly. Somewhere in her foggy mind, something pushed back. A voice. A song, a hand pulling her through fire. A sister, but the collar shocked her gently, and the memory disappeared like smoke. "Stay quiet," the machine whispered. "Obey." Meanwhile, Elias and Niari crouched in the narrow vent above the lab. They had returned that night using the same secret path. This time, they came with a stolen guard badge to smoke capsules and a reckless plan. "She's just sitting there," Niari whispered, her voice trembling. "She looks lost." Elias looked down through the vent grate. His heart cracked at the sight of Sella chained. Broken eyes blank. "That's not her," Niari whispered again. "They did something to her. We're going to get her back," Elias said firmly. No matter what they did, no matter how far they pushed her mind. He handed Niari a small earpiece. "When I give the signal, throw the capsule." Niari nodded. Her small hands shaking but determined. They had only one shot. Elias dropped down from the vent like a ghost, landing behind the scientist without a sound before the man could react. Elias slammed the butt of his toolkit into the back of his head. The scientist collapsed instantly. "Now?" Elias hissed into the comm. A puff of white smoke burst from the vent above, filling the lab in seconds. Elias grabbed a metal cutter and rushed toward Sella's chair. She didn't move, didn't blink. Her eyes just followed the smoke. "Hey, Sella," Elias whispered. "It's me." He began cutting the collar wires, sparks flying. "Sella, your sister's here. She's waiting, just like she promised." Something in her eyes flickered. Her fingers twitched. he cut the last wire, and the machine behind her sparked loudly, then died. Nyari jumped down from the vent and ran to her sister, Sela. She cried, grabbing her hand, but Sela didn't move, her lips parted slightly. My. Nyar. Neri's eyes filled with tears. Yes. She whispered, yes, it's me. You're safe now. Then the alarm screamed. Intrusion detected, secure the lab guards incoming. Elias shouted. He scooped up Sela in his arms. She's too weak to run. I'll lead the way. Nyari yelled, grabbing Elias's sleeve and pulling toward the back door. They burst into the hallway, smoke trailing behind them. Red lights flashing along the ceiling. 3 guards rounded the corner, weapons raised, dropped the girl. One barked. Elias didn't stop. Nyari reached into her pocket and threw a second smoke capsule at their feet. Boom! A blast of fog filled the air. The guards shouted in confusion, coughing, stumbling. They ran through the chaos, past locked rooms, through the steel tunnel toward the waste chute, the only escape Radek had marked on the map. As they reached the chute, Sela stirred in Elias's arms. Her voice cracked through the pain. You came back. Nyari grabbed her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. I told you, she said. I promised I'd find you, behind them. Guards shouted, closer, louder. Elias yanked open the hatch door. This drops into the drainage system, he said. Hold your breath. They jumped. Water slammed into them, cold and fast, sweeping them through the underground pipes. Elias held Sela tightly, shielding her body. Nyari clung to his arm, screaming as they were thrown into darkness. They hit the bottom hard, landing in a pool beneath the fortress, hidden by rock and fog, gasping for breath. They dragged themselves onto a dry patch of stone, coughing, shivering, but they were alive. Sela lay on the ground, eyes fluttering open slowly. She reached for Nyar, weak fingers brushing her sister's cheek. You really came, Nyari nodded, hugging her tightly. I'm never leaving you again. Elias sat beside them, his body sore and bleeding from the fall, but his heart was lighter than it had been in days. They had her back, but he knew this wasn't the end. The Empire would not forgive this. They would hunt them. They would burn entire planets to erase this shame. But Elias didn't care. He looked at the 2 girls, brave, broken, whole again, and he whispered, We're not done. We're just getting started. The small cave beneath the fortress was damp and dark. Water dripped from the ceiling like a ticking clock. Each drop felt like a countdown, a reminder that time was running out. Elias sat near the cave wall, wrapping a bandage around his bleeding arm. His body ached from the fall through the waste chute. Nyari sat close to Sela, who was weak and barely awake. She shivered, her eyes wide open but lost. She's cold, Nyari said, placing her blanket around Sela's shoulders. She's still not talking much. Elias nodded. They broke something inside her, he said quietly. But it's not gone. Just buried. Nyari looked at her sister, then whispered, I remember when we were little, she used to hold my hand and hum a tune every night. A song our mother taught us. She began to hum softly, a slow melody that echoed in the silence. Sela's fingers twitched, her lips moved slightly. Elias leaned in. Sela. She blinked, and for the first time, her eyes focused. Neri's voice trembled. Do you remember this song? I do, Sela whispered. It's warm. Her voice cracked like dry leaves. But it was hers again, real, not controlled. Not programmed, Elias smiled. She's coming back. But outside the cave, the Empire was not resting. The scientists they had knocked unconscious had been found. The alarm had spread to nearby military outposts. A search party was already moving through the lower sectors. Elias knew they couldn't stay here much longer. He looked at the girls. We need to get out of this sector tonight, but where will we go? Nyari asked. Elias pulled out Radek's map and pointed to a symbol on the edge. There's a tunnel that leads to the old transport yard if we can get past the flame vents and security drones. There's a hidden exit that feeds into the wildlands. Nyari nodded. What about Sela? Elias looked at Salashi, was sitting up now. Slowly regaining her strength, I'll carry her if I have to, he said. But she'll walk, because I believe she still has more fight left. Sela looked at him, her voice soft. Will they come for us? They already are, Elias said, but we won't let them win. They moved out just before dawn. Elias carried a flare torch in one hand and guided the girls through the dripping tunnels. Every step echoed, every corner could hide a soldier. But the girls stayed close, silent and ready, at the flame vents. Elias deactivated the safety sensors with his hacked scanner. Gouts of fire erupted in timed intervals across the walkway. Sela stared at the flames, her body frozen. Fire, she whispered. That's what they used. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. It's not real now. It's just heat and light. You're stronger than this. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and stepped forward. One flame, two flames. She walked between them without shaking. Nyari followed, eyes never leaving her sister. At the end of the passage, they reached the old transport yard. It was filled with broken machines, smashed cargo crates, and scorched earth. But it was quiet, too quiet. Elias signaled for them to stop. Something was wrong. Then came the hum. A massive drone dropped from above. Red lights scanning, weapons armed. Run. Elias shouted, pushing the girls behind a crate. The drone fired explosions ripped through the yard. Flames lighting up the dark, Nyari cried out as the heat brushed her face. Sela grabbed her and shielded her body with her own. Elias picked up a broken metal pipe and ran toward the drone. Hey, over here, he shouted. The drone turned, locking onto him before it could fire again. Sela screamed, a high-pitched, sharp cry that echoed like a shockwave. The drone staggered, its sensors glitching. Sela's implants glowed faintly. Reacting to her will, she fell to her knees. But the drone buckled and shut down. Sparks flew, and it crashed to the ground in smoke. Elias ran to her side. You did that, he whispered in shock. Sela looked up, breathless. I don't want to be their weapon, but I can still use what they gave me, together. They ran to the edge of the yard and found the old escape tunnel. As they slipped through the narrow exit, Elias turned one last time behind them. He saw a fuel line exposed, leaking near the drone wreck. He lit a flare and tossed it back. The yard exploded into fire. A final message to the Empire. We were here, and we're not afraid anymore. They didn't stop running until they reached the edge of the wildlands. Burned, bruised, and breathless but free. Elias dropped to his knees, smiling. We made it. Sela and Nyari stood together, hand in hand, and for the first time since the arena. Both sisters smiled. The sun rose over the wildlands, painting the broken sky in colors of gold and fire. Elias, Nyari, and Sela sat on a rocky cliffside. Looking down at the green valley below, it had been days since their escape from the fortress. Days of hiding, running, healing. But now, help had arrived. A large human transport ship hovered quietly over the clearing, its sleek silver wings reflecting sunlight as it landed gently on the grass. Soldiers stepped out, not enemies, but allies. The banner on their chest read, Terran Humanitarian Forces. Elias raised his hand in greeting. The lead officer, a woman in full armor, approached and removed her helmet. Your doctor, Elias Ward, she said. You've caused quite a storm, Elias nodded. I did what had to be done. I didn't plan to start a war just saved to girls. The officer looked at the sisters. Her eyes softening. "We received your distress beacon and the footage you sent. It spread like wildfire." "Footage?" Elias asked, surprised. She nodded, handing him a compad. "You left your medical scanner on when you dropped into the lab. It recorded everything: Sella's condition, the experiments, the escape. You even captured the drone's voice logs." Elias blinked in shock. He hadn't realized it. He had been too focused on saving them to notice. The officer looked him in the eye. "The whole galaxy saw what they did to these children. There are riots across the outer colonies. Even council members are demanding trials." Niari held Sella's hand tighter. "Are we safe now?" she asked. The officer knelt beside her. "You're more than safe," she said gently. "You're part of the reason everything is changing." Sella's eyes were still cautious. But something inside her had healed. She looked up and whispered, "They used me, but they didn't win." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "No," he said, "they didn't." The trio was taken aboard the ship. And as the engines lifted them into the sky, Sella pressed her face to the window. Below them, the fortress that had once held her was now burning. Other rebel groups had moved in, guided by the beacon Elias had planted. The lab, the cages, the pennant was all being erased. 1 week later, the trial began, broadcasted across every screen in the galaxy. The judge stood tall before the Galactic Council. Elias sat with Sella and Niari on one side, the surviving children from the cages on the other. The alien judge from the arena was dragged in, shackled and bruised. The same voice that once commanded death now shook with fear. The head of the council spoke. "Dr. Elias Ward, do you wish to speak?" Elias stood, his voice clear but calm. "I'm not a warrior," he said. "I'm not a rebel. Not a spy. I'm a doctor, and I watched a society ask me to decide which child should die. I watched people cheer as innocence was ripped away. I was forced to pick one sister to live in. I'll carry that pain forever." He turned to face the council. "But I got them both back, and I won't stop until every cage in this galaxy is broken." The room was silent. Even the council members who once ignored war crimes now looked shaken. Sella stood slowly, her small voice filling the air. "They hurt me. They tried to erase who I was, but my sister came for me, and a human gave me back my life." Tears filled the eyes of many watching. On distant planets, strangers wept. Parents held their children closer. Governments were forced to respond. The system that allowed such cruelty was cracking after the trial. Elias and the sisters were granted full sanctuary under the Terran Unity Accord. They were relocated to a peaceful human colony on Gaia's edge. A small house by the lake, fields of flowers, and no walls. Sella built toy ships again. Niari ran barefoot in the grass. And Elias finally slept without guilt, but they didn't forget. They built a school not just for humans, but for alien children too, a place where no one would be caged, forgotten, or turned into a weapon. They called it the House of Two Sisters. And on the front gate, carved into metal, were the words, "Hope cannot be chained," every year. Elias would sit on the porch and tell the story to new students. And every time he said those terrible words, "Pick one sister, human," he would pause, then smile, and say, "But I didn't stop until I saved them both and across the stars." The galaxy remembered, not just the pain, but the fire that followed. And the human who chose to be more than a witness, he chose to be a light.